Welcome to the Dylan Experience. I'm your host, Dylan Sessler, and my co-host is Kyle Zahn.
Hello.
We are here to help change the way the world looks at mental health, self-development, and overcoming adversity. Thanks for joining us here on episode 3, where we're going to be talking about depression and kind of specifically getting to teen depression. So, man, there's a lot to digest here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
it's gonna be this might be a long one for us.
What we're going to try and do is kind of, and this is for the listeners out there, we're going to try and discuss how to come to a good definition of depression, because I don't think they're really, I was looking at what psychiatry.org and the Mayo Clinic, which we're going to talk about for sources. I don't like them. I don't like the definitions that they have. Like it doesn't really give a good understanding of what depression really is. Like, it says mood disorder, but what does that mean? Like, that's really
That's a
questionable
broad
to me.
term.
Yeah, I mean, and I get that. I get they kind of have to be broad in a term of depression, because depression comes from so many different places. It can be from so many different things and have, I don't know, it's really difficult to kind of grasp.
There's so many variables.
Right. And I can see why that's very hard to define, but we're going to try,
Yeah, we'll give it a shot.
So you've done more research than I have this week. So why don't you kind of give us a few statistics to kind of, lay it out for us?
Absolutely. All right. So specifically on teen depression, I did look up a few things that the CDC said. Of kids 12 to 17 years of age, 6% are clinically diagnosed with depression. 10.5% are diagnosed with anxiety, and 7.5% are diagnosed with other behavioral disorders. Keyword, diagnosed.
Right. That's just diagnosed. Right. That's 6% are depressed. And that's just diagnosed. That's not even accounting for all of the people, or I should say kids at this point, kids that are undiagnosed and unaccounted for.
Yep.
That's crazy.
The ones that didn't reach out are the ones that just were left under the rug, unfortunately.
Right. What else we got?
Let's see here. Among children aged 2 to 8 years, boys were more likely than girls to have a mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Explain.
Well, let's look at that age bracket, right?
Mm-hmm.
And parenting, right? I think parenting is so critical for that time, right? If you're not willing to, one, tell your child no, you open up this child to a world of I'm in charge. But then what happens in the real world, right? What happens when you get
smashed?
Right? When you get to 10, 11, 12 years old and you go to school and you get demolished, right? Like, especially boys, right? And this is the thing, is like, but not only that, like, that's kind of getting off subject, but when you teach boys, what is the societal standard of teaching boys?
Strength.
Exactly. Right. Like, I was thinking it, but you said it. And so I'm sitting here like, the one thing that boys are supposed to be is strong, right? Whether it's physical, mental, doesn't matter. Strong.
Mm-hmm.
There's an expectation that is unrealistic of human beings at 2 to 8 years old, pushed on boys specifically. It's not pushed on girls. Other things are pushed on girls, and there's problems with that, right? That's why girls struggle with eating disorders more than boys do, right? So there's give and take. Obviously, there's, each gender is going to struggle with different things, but boys,
absolutely,
the societal standard of boys being strong at the beginning of life is unrealistic. They're 2, they're 4, they're 6, they're 8 years old. What do you want them to do, right? Like, you want them to be men at I, like I had to learn how to be a man at 6 years old. Let me tell you how it felt. It sucked. It wasn't fair, right? And it shouldn't have happened. And it almost killed me, right? And with strength, right? The societal standard that's put in place for boys also has, fine print, and that fine print is silence. All right. I've been talking about this a lot lately,
Mhm.
right? Silence goes hand in hand with strength, and it's wrong. It's a fallacy, right? Strength is not silence, or I should say, it's not just silence. It's silence along with the balance of expression.
Mhm.
And when you don't understand that and you're a parent, you tell boys to be quiet, suck it up, get over it, move on. And we've all done it, right?
Of
We've
course.
even said
Yep.
it to our friends, right? Like, I'm a man, I've said it to my friends, other men have said it to me, right? But when you don't understand the implications of that, guess what? Among children aged 2 to 8, boys were more likely than girls to have a mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder, and that's the price we pay for having this stigma on men being strong and silent rather than strong, silent, and expressive. Yep, and we pay the price, right? That's why
Yep.
75% of men eventually commit. 75% of suicides are men. We pay the price.
That's crazy. Wow. All right. Well, the next one I had here, age and poverty level affected the likelihood of children receiving treatment for anxiety, depression, or behavioral problems.
And that's interesting to me. Well, no, it's not. I'm not surprised, right? Like age and poverty level, obviously. If you don't have the money to send your kid to a, a psychiatrist, a therapist, psychologist, whatever, right? If you don't have the money to give them help, you're not going to. Not a
It's
surprise at all.
Yep. I agree with that. It's difficult when you don't have the funds or the available resources to do so.
Right.
All right, let's see. Last one I got here for you. Behavior problems are more common among children aged 6 to 11 years than children who are younger or older.
And that is incredibly like fascinating to me. Like break that down. Behavioral problems are more common among children between 6 and 11 than
Hmm.
before or after.
Yep.
Why is that so fascinating? Why
Well, I
6 to
mean,
11?
you think about it, your traumatic experience in life happened right at the age of 6.
Right, but that could have happened at any time.
Sure, absolutely.
But why is it more common from 6 to 11? I think, and you know, let me know what you think, but what I
Yeah.
think is that 6 years old, that age time, right? That moment in your life, you really start to remember things. Like
Yeah.
you like you actually have real tangible memories when you're 6 years old. And you actually start not just memories, but you actually start to understand the world. And I think, because I know this from, the body keeps the score, before 6 years old, the some of the worst like CPTSD and PTSD trauma, if you're traumatized before the age of 6, it's hard, it's bad, right? It has huge long-term effects down your
Mhm.
lifespan, um, to the point where you can uh, produce, you know illnesses, like physical ailments, like things like fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis at earlier ages because of how much stress your body was under. So
Yep.
I get that. I think it makes sense that around 6 years old is like when we're really developing our critical thinking and our first real understanding of social life. And if you're not, for me, I think if you're not socialized from 1 to 6 years old, then when you actually hit society, which is right when, 6 years old is right around when you do what, kindergarten, first grade kind of thing.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and if you walk into class and you've been traumatized before that, how do you deal with that?
It's kind of hard to explain because you get to this point where the first 5 years of your life, you haven't had that. And now you're getting into that age, that year 6, and you are basically throwing a brick at yourself.
Right. Yeah. And it's the, for the first time, it's probably actually noticeable, like within the family, within the family unit, within the home, within the, the context of home, it's probably normal, right? If your father's abusive, it's probably normal behavior for you to be, a people pleasing child. But then when you get to school, when that behavior comes out, other children take advantage of that. And that's when
Yep.
bullying starts, and, all of these other adverse reactions to not being socialized to protect yourself, or maybe you protect yourself too much because your father is abusive. And yeah, I mean, like, maybe you become the bully, or maybe you become the bullied, right? So I think, it's fascinating to think about. I would love to hear more research on why 6 to 11, more
Right.
solid evidence. Obviously, what we're talking about is more like opinionated and, you know, hypotheses, but
Yeah.
that's incredible. That's a really interesting age.
Wow. Yeah, that's the big 5 I had for you, I guess. Let's dive into it a little bit.
And I want to dive into defining depression before
Sure.
we really get into talking about how,
Mm-hmm.
especially teen depression, um, because it's hard to really talk about something without a good working definition. And I think this is going to be kind of hard. I think this is going to be
Yeah.
a difficult
Cool.
task.
Yep.
So I'm going to read kind of a couple things. So one from psychiatry.org, and then one from the Mayo Clinic. I'm going to start with the Mayo Clinic because that's an actual definition,
Sure.
or as best of a definition as they can give. So the Mayo Clinic says depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. Also called major depressive disorder or clinical depression, it affects how you feel, think, and behave, and can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. You may have trouble doing normal day to day activities, and sometimes you may feel as if life isn't worth living. That doesn't define it very well to me. I get mood disorder that causes persistent feelings of sadness and loss of interest. I get that. It's general, it's broad.
It's too basic.
But it doesn't dive into anything of like where it comes from. I hate the word disorder. It doesn't fit with the mind. Like, for some reason, because you have a mental disorder, you like, no, it makes it feel like, you are the cause. And I disagree, right? Like,
Yeah.
the same way I look at suicide, it's not the problem, it's the result, is the same way I look at depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar. All of these disorders, right, are not problems. They are results of the actual problems. And I hate how society likes to define the end result as a problem. I think that's dumb. I think that causes more problems than it solves. And I think we need to start being actually more careful about what we define as the real problem.
Because there's gonna be people that are looking these definitions up every day and thinking, "Oh, I have a problem."
Right. And in a sense, you have the result of a problem. And that's what makes it hard, because and this is this is where it makes defining depression hard, is because the cause of depression is so multifaceted, right? There could be so many
Yep.
things, right? Um, and it can stem from trauma. It can stem from, the natural hormonal um, imbalance through things like seasonal depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of not getting enough vitamin D or having a thyroid issue, vitamin deficiency in general. I mean, there's so many different places that can come from. It could be familial, where people within your family don't allow the expression, right? And that's a natural way to get, I think, to get depression, is that if you're not allowed to express, then you're
How are
not
you gonna?
right.
Yeah.
That's how you get serotonin and uh, oxytocin, is through discussion, through connection,
Mm-hmm.
through feeling. And if you can't get those things, depression, and among other things, right? There's so many other things
Mm-hmm.
that can come from that, but that's one of them. So it's hard. It's hard to define depression when you're working with such a broad, you know, set of parameters that build it. So,
Absolutely. It comes down to like your environment, your experiences through that environment, and it's all over time too, because things can change.
that's from my book. I talked about that in my book.
Hey,
Experience, environment, time. You know, it's true. I mean, that's how I look at those things. Um, let's talk about symptoms. So
sure.
we can kind of begin to define at least what it looks like, and then we can maybe, who knows, we can try to come up with a working definition that doesn't make the diagnosis a death sentence to people. So I think it
Right.
really is, and I think that's one of the things that we really need to talk about near to the end.
Right.
So, depression symptoms. This is from psychiatry.org. Can obviously vary from mild to severe. Can include feeling sad or having a depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure in activities once enjoyed, changes in appetites, weight loss or gain unrelated to dieting, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of energy or increased fatigue, increase in purposeless physical activity. For example, inability to sit still, pacing, hand wringing. I don't know what that means, or slowed
Mhm.
movements or speech. Um, Feeling worthless or guilty, difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions, thoughts of death or suicide. And so what psychiatry.org says is symptoms must last at least 2 weeks to represent a more or less depression. So
So I guess my question to you is this: um, what were you feeling when you were going through depression? Honestly.
alone, and you know, I I kind of understood where mine came from. I kind of always knew it was it was the loneliness that I created for myself after my dad's death. Right? It was this step in a direction of nobody understands me. Right? So it was very much a self-fulfilling prophecy of me. No one understands me and they never will. It was
Right.
a definitive extreme response of no one will ever understand what I've been through. And with with that, there was always a feeling of sadness, right? Like if you want to look at these symptoms, I had feeling of sadness, depressed mood all the time, loss of interest in some things, yes. I didn't really have any kind of change in appetite, I would say, or not that I knew of. Definitely trouble sleeping. Uh, Absolutely increased fatigue. Um, yeah, I increase of purposeless physical activity. Um, what's the leg movement, when you
Oh,
bounce your
restless
leg.
leg
Yeah,
syndrome.
restless leg syndrome. I probably have that. Definitely feeling worthless or guilty. Difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions. Absolutely. Thoughts of death or suicide. Obviously, you know, I had all of them, and it was more than 2 weeks. So I know. So for sure, depression. It's and it's hard, like it's hard to get out of that cycle of, and it feels like a cycle because every person has a hormonal cycle. It's usually around a month, whether you're male or female. It's a thing for all of us.
Hmm.
um you'd come up, you'd feel okay for a couple days, and then you'd come right back down. One thing would happen and it would trigger, you know in a sense, like it would just bring you down to it would just remind me especially of my place. And what I thought my place was for many years of my life was worthless. My dad didn't stay, so what am I worth? Right? I refuse to look at my sister. I refuse to look at my mom. I refuse to look at the people around me that cared for me and loved me. They didn't exist because one person showed that they weren't going to stay for me. And realistically,
Sure.
I wasn't looking at it right. So a lot of it was perspective based. It was
Hmm.
taking this perspective that I built myself from what I saw around me at 6 years old, right? And that's why it's so interesting, that age, 6 years old, is I built this. I built this attitude. I built this mindset. I built this perspective of what was happening around me. And I didn't allow anyone else's opinion to matter, only mine.
Hmm.
And that really developed where I went with it. It really, you know, created a pretty solid momentum of events that kept me in that place, and repeating that cycle over and over and over again.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what, if you read the book Coherence by Alan Watkins, he talks about depression, and the cycle of depression, of it creating cortisol. Right? Cortisol is the stress hormone, and when you create cortisol, right, from a stressful event, well, guess what? You get depressed because of cortisol. And guess what happens when you get depressed because of cortisol? It
You
creates
create
more
more.
cortisol. It's a vicious cycle, right? That's why it's so hard to get out of depression, is because you're literally creating the hormone while being within the cycle of depression. You're creating the hormone that keeps you in depression. And it's the opposing hormones that get you out of depression. It's oxytocin, right? It's the endorphins. It's the serotonin, right? It's the adrenaline. It's all of them, though. It's not just one. You can't just go work out and
Hmm.
expect yourself to begin feeling better. You have to start connecting with the world. You have to start working out on a regular basis so you can feel the dopamine of being successful again, right? And the serotonin from connecting with people, and the oxytocin from doing things for people, and feeling love and feeling connection. And all of those things matter.
Hmm.
It's not just one. And that's why depression is so difficult. That's why it can become so severe. Um, so yeah, I had to, I had to step into that, around 25 years old, and kind of make a change. And that's, here I am, you know. What about you?
Absolutely.
Did did you ever get into that kind of state?
Um, so I had let's see here, the loss of interest and pleasure in activities. I got to a point where I was not willing to go out, and even during like the summer and stuff, go out and run or go play golf, like simple activities such as that. Uh, weight gain, I think, was a big thing, and I wasn't like eating much at all. It was just lack of initiative to do anything about it at the time.
Sure.
Um, I would say my sleeping pattern, I had trouble staying asleep. There was times where I did feel like worthless or guilty about things, even though I know today that I shouldn't have.
Was that so? Was that before or after your brother?
This was all after.
After. Okay. And
Hmm
what age did you lose your brother?
I was 17 at the time.
17.
Yep, he was 16. He was my full brother, so same mom, same dad.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was just like a really out of the place moment for me in life where I was no longer at the driver's seat.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a really good analogy for it. Is that before these events, right? Before these moments in our lives, I think there are so many. When you really look at life, there is a handful of moments that truly shape us.
Yep.
And trauma is so powerful in that in shaping people. You know, the some of the strongest people on the planet have been traumatized at a young age, but come out of it and create this persona of themselves that is unbreakable. But it takes so much work. It takes so much dedication and just absolute tenacity to get through these
Right.
things. And it also takes so much connection and perspective. And these moments come and just hit us in the face with life. And you're so right. Like you nailed it with it took us out of the driver's seat. You know, it threw us in the trunk and gagged us and told us to shut the fuck up. Or
And deal with it.
right, and deal with it. And even though people are like, yeah, you can always come to me, it's like, no, because you
I
have
can't
no
hear you from the
idea.
back seat.
You have no idea what it's like to be locked in a trunk without a voice. You
Hmm
just don't know. And then to be dragged out of the trunk and buried, because that's what it feels like. It's like those things feel like you're being buried alive.
Yep.
Everything around you is crushing you. Like I mean, it's just so powerful. And if you want to cure people of that, it can't, like, it's so weird. Like, it can't be you. Like, it can't be me talking to a teen and saying, here's what you got to do, because that would cure everything, right? Like, every therapist in the world would cure people. Here's what you got to do.
That teen has got to want it for themselves too.
Absolutely. That's why I don't speak like I don't come on to my podcast. I don't come on to my TikTok or my Instagram and I say,
Hmm
I can I can make the difference. I can change you. I can fix you. I can take it all away. I can't help you change you.
hmm
That's it. Like, if a therapist says they can cure you, if a life coach says he can fix you, if somebody of any kind of authority says they can change your life, it's wrong. Like, it's blatantly wrong. Like, a, a politician could give you $1 million. Guess what? If you're bad at
You're still
finances,
sad.
you're still gonna fuck it up, right?
Yep.
If you're depressed, you're gonna spend all that money and you're gonna be depressed,
hmm
right? If you had trauma before, $1 million is not gonna fix your trauma. Simple. It's like Inception. Like, I live and breathe and speak the movie Inception. I don't like leadership to me is Inception. It's about pushing people to think it's their idea, right? So, like, when I consistently make TikToks every single day and send out a text message every single day, guess what? Eventually, it becomes their idea.
mm
Eventually, right? And I'm seeing this right now. This is beautiful, right? I saw like it started about a month and a half ago, where people were like responding to me on my text messages, which by the way is 1-608-336-4480. You can text me. Um, I'm seeing this for the first time, is that 6 months of texting is reaching people to the point where they're like, I've been getting your text message for 6 months and I'm actually starting to see a change in my life. I'm paying attention more. I'm connecting with myself more. I'm actually seeing opportunities where I didn't before. I'm starting to learn about myself and actually pay attention and research and read books
Right.
and listen to podcasts and listen to audiobooks. And Dylan, I just have to thank you. And I'm just like, it's your idea, right? I I like I love that because I know what I did, but I love that they see themselves actually doing the work,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know that if I hadn't done anything, maybe they would have not done anything, right? If I don't wake up and make my TikToks and send my texts every day, who knows what could happen? You know,
Yeah.
people go on with their lives, but maybe they won't change their life. Maybe they won't speak their truth, or block their narcissistic father, or push out, push away from their family that's controlling and manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep going, and that's what I love. I love seeing my impact in other people, whether they see it or not. I don't need people to come up and thank me for what I do. I know what I do is good. That's why I do it. I love
Mm-hmm.
it. I love being a good person. It makes me happy. I don't need recognition, but I do like seeing impact. And that's where this kind of discussion of depression is really interesting, is because we're talking about it, you know, a mood disorder or mindset disorder or whatever you want to call it, that is consistently the opposite of what I'm doing. Right? It's the opposite of connecting with people. It's the opposite of inspiring people and motivating people and supporting people and pushing people to be their best. It's the opposite of all those things.
Right.
So it's my
Yeah. It almost makes me wonder if the one reason why it's so hard to define is because there's one variable that changes everything, and that's your mind. If you really think about it, everybody's mind has a different way of thinking. Everybody's going to react to a certain trauma a different way,
I love where this is
which is
going.
why it makes these definitions so almost where they have to be so broad and so vague, because they can't be in that person's mind 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. I love this. I love this. I love discussions like this.
Yeah.
I mean, like it goes to my book. Like you've read that piece of my book in terms of, I look at life as experience plus environment over time equals life. It equals who you are and who you become. It's not a perfect equation, but it's an understanding of when you feel this experience, whether it's a person or a moment or whatever consistent experience, and within an environment, a specific environment, and there's a certain amount of time, you can generally predict what's going to happen to that person, right? When someone's sexually abused in their home over years, well, guess what? They're going to struggle with CPTSD, you know, like depression, anxiety, they're probably going to disassociate. They're probably going to have bipolar issues because they can't manage emotions, because the people that did not keep them safe, that were supposed to keep them safe, abuse them, right? And it's quite simple in a sense, because the one thing, right? And we've talked about this. When you look at that, there's physical environment, there's cognitive environment, right? So there's the physical, you know, I'm here, I'm in an office, I'm in my office right now, you're in
Mm-hmm.
your hotel room, and there's the cognitive space, right? My mind space, right? And there's physical experience of what happened, right? What physically happened, and there's mental. There's the cognitive experience of what did it feel like? How did I react to it? How did my body respond to it? And all of that, right? Those two things, cognitive experience and cognitive environment, are the keys, right? They're the keys that are missing, right? If you're a janitor, those are the keys you don't have. Those are the keys you lost back in 1994, and you've never seen them again if you've been through trauma, right? Because why do you want those, right? Why do you want those keys? Those are the keys that open up doors that physically hurt, that mentally hurt, and you don't want to open those doors. And, like you said it best, is like depression, because it's so hard to define, is because you can't open those doors for people. They have to open them themselves, and they have to express themselves, and they have to pull it out of themselves to show, here's why I'm depressed, right? They have to accept the truth and react to the truth, and that hurts, right? Like I was talking with a client a couple of weeks ago. I'd say triggers. You can't get over triggers if you don't feel triggers. So if you hide from triggers, you're not going to overcome them. Excuse me. So when you want to overcome something, exposure therapy is a thing for a reason. You can't
Yep.
you can't, like, as a veteran, I couldn't get over fireworks by hiding from fireworks. Otherwise, I'd constantly be afraid of fireworks, right? After I came home from Afghanistan, they put me on edge. But when I introduce myself, just like I'm going into cold water, just a toe at a time, finger at a time, that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty cold, right? If I watch fireworks from afar, I'm good. And step back into it. One more step, one more step, one more step. And now I can sit directly underneath fireworks, look up at them and be, ooh, and ah, right? And be
Mm-hmm.
just fine. But it takes work, and that's a relatively easy one for me,
Right.
but it takes the work, it takes doing. And that's the hard part, is because how do we we can't impact everyone's mind the same. And you're absolutely right. How do we define that for people that are traumatized? How do we define that for people that have bad parents? How do we define that for people that have seasonal depression, versus how do we define that to people that have, you know, other issues? Yeah, I mean, there's
And
like, yeah,
and the fact of the matter is, you don't know that person 100% because you don't know what they're thinking every moment of every day.
yeah. And here's a question:
Mm-hmm.
is depression, it for some reason, it almost feels like society treats depression almost as if it's not natural. Do you get that impression, or is that just me?
I feel like society, no, I would say that, oh, that's tough. I feel like society plays a role in how we react to it.
Sure. I think that's the obviously not everybody,
Yeah,
but it's a thing that happens to people that nobody wants to deal with.
that would make sense.
Like, why would I want to deal with a depressed person? They're depressed.
And
I
there's
mean,
people out there that literally dip and dive away from people because they have problems
yeah.
or issues they're facing.
It's like people with depression want to be alone in a sense, but they don't want to, like, they're lonely,
It's a weird thought.
right? They want to be alone for the guilt, right? And because they don't want to bring people down, but they're lonely, so they don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
alone. But then people that don't have depression also don't want to be around depressed people. They want to be happy, they want to be joyful, and they want to, they want to be around people that inspire them and make them happier and better and enjoy life,
And then you got the special breeds like us that are there to really pick up those pieces.
because we've been there.
Yeah.
How do we, right? Like we're talking about, um, I mean, let's be real. Like we're talking about teen depression.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough like system. That's a tough age to have that kind of mentality of, if I'm depressed, I don't want to be around people, but I want to be around
Right.
people. It's a tough age because you're coming into your hormones and trying to learn about who you are, learn about your body. Obviously, sex becomes a thing in
Yep.
high school, and that can be scary
Mm-hmm.
for people. You can be, a lot of people are sexually abused in high school and college, and how much of that is because of the effects of depression, of like not understanding boundaries and not being able to stand up for yourself in a way of, it's all interesting. It's all difficult to really put together, as
Right.
as as what am I trying to say? I don't know. I mean, as difficult as it is, or as not popular, but as well understood and well known as depression is, why is there nothing that really has been done, has been cured of this disorder? And I say that in parentheses and quotations.
And
Disorder.
I believe it goes back to what I said before. Nobody thinks the same.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever treatment you give to one person for that disorder, it may not work for the next.
And a lot
And
of,
I hate using the word disorder so
yeah,
much because it's not. It's a reaction to a problem. It's
I would say it's more dysfunction.
yeah.
Like I don't. Well, hold on. I'm gonna look up definitions. You
Hmm,
talk for a little bit.
sure. And it brings up the fact like teens going through those kind of changes coming into high school, they are thinking about so much in a day, and now they have to worry about my body's changing like more and more every day. How
Right.
what is this? Why is this happening? And
So
that's stressful enough.
right. So here's the difference between dysfunction and disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Disorder is, so as a noun, it's a state of confusion. As a verb, it's disrupt the systematic functioning of a neat arrangement. I don't
Hmm.
know. It's weird. Dysfunction or dysfunctional is not operating normally or properly. And I think that fits
Think that would
depression.
fit better.
Right.
I think that would fit better than yeah.
I feel like depression is dysfunction. If you want to
Yep.
define it, it's dysfunction. It's not a mood disorder. It's dysfunction. Because let's be like, let's think about this, right? Like, let's look at the symptoms, right? Feeling sad or having a depressed mood. That's dysfunction from how you think. It's dysfunction of how you have habitually wired your thoughts. Of like, I think I'm sad for a habit. Every day I feel like I'm sad, right? Because maybe it's an event, maybe it's because you're alone, maybe it's because you're lonely, whatever. Consistent thought of I am sad creates habit, and that habit becomes dysfunction because you're not a part of society.
Yep.
Loss of interest or pleasure in activities once enjoyed. If it's an event,
it changed. Yeah,
right.
Your event changed.
The event changed how you think. It's dysfunction within how you think. Changes in appetite, right? Like when you stop eating healthy, whether you have, like, if we're talking teen depression, maybe it's parental supervision. Maybe it's parental oversight of like, I think you need to eat more vegetables. I think you need to eat more. I think you need to eat less. And so it's dysfunction within communication, right? Trouble sleeping or trouble sleeping too much. Quite simply, that is, more often than not, that's linked to trauma. That's a big one that's linked to trauma. It could be other things, but, it could be chronic pain as well. And that's dysfunction within the body. It's dysfunction of your systems, and oftentimes that's linked to trauma. Loss of energy or increased fatigue. Maybe that's because of physical activity. Maybe you're not working out, and nobody's talking to you about it. Nobody's communicating with you, right? As I said earlier, the cure, and I shouldn't say the cure, right? What I think will help people cure themselves of depression is attacking the problem from all angles, right? Connecting with people, right? Finding love, working out consistently, eating healthy, right? Reconnecting with your body. So becoming more in tune with who you are. And that's a lot of that's working out, but a lot of that's also, especially if it's trauma, reconnecting with what happened and working through them.
And that's often the toughest piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And then repurposing your thoughts and transforming your thoughts and creating different perspectives about what you're actually thinking about. But again, it's also within an environment that can actually support you. And I think that's the hard part, is that when you're stuck in an environment that doesn't support you and you're a teen, what do? You can go work out at the gym,
but you're still coming back to the environment that caused the issue in the first place.
You cannot heal in the same place that made you bleed.
Yep.
I mean, that's the reality.
That's huge.
You want to help teens? Give them a safe environment to express themselves. And you're not going to like it sometimes, right? If you're a parent, the things that they say, if they're allowed to truly feel, they're going to let out some things that you don't like, because they're going to attack your parenting. And you cannot get mad at them, because guess what? If you're a parent, you're going to fail. You're going to do the wrong thing. One, because society taught you, right? Your parents taught you how to parent, and it worked for you. But guess what? If you're a mother and your parents raised a daughter who is you, and you're raising a boy, if you treat that boy the same way that your generation of parents treated a girl, think about that, right? There's genders here, right? And however you look at genders, whether there's two genders or more genders, it doesn't matter. However you treat that child matters. If you treat them like a boy and they're a girl, It's gonna cause problems. If you treat them like a girl and they're a boy, it's gonna cause problems.
Mhm.
If you don't show them the fundamentals of communicating their emotions, if you don't show them the fundamentals of taking care of themselves, taking care of their minds, learning, right? The values of learning, the values of empathy, the values of compassion, you're going to come to a point where you have not allowed this child to speak for so long that when they do, it's going to be explosive. It's going to be harmful. It's going to be painful for multiple people, both them and the other person. And it's not going to be compassionate. It's not going to be empathetic, right? When you suppress emotions, when you suppress communication, when you suppress these things, what do you expect? Right? When you tell a child to get over it for so long and they can't, they become guilty or they become angry. Neither of them are good.
No. It's almost like resentment at that point.
Yeah, that's what it builds. When you don't communicate with your child, when you don't allow your child to speak, you build resentment. And when it comes out, how the parent reacts is fundamentally important. If you don't have empathy for their resentment, good luck, right? You're probably going to lose them, right? If you do, you might have a chance, but that doesn't mean you do. That doesn't mean you will. That's the hard part. That's life, you know? Like, it's not fair, but if you treat someone poorly and you don't know it, yeah, you can forgive yourself, but that doesn't mean they have to forgive you. And that's tough,
It
you
is.
know? But it's important to understand. You know, like if you're a parent, you've really got to look at how you're communicating with your child. Are you treating them like a child? My son's 9 years old. I treat him like an adult. I'm honest with him. If I mess up, I mess up. I own up to it. I tell him. I don't lie to him. You know, if I don't know something, I tell him I don't know.
Being ignorant is okay.
Yeah.
You're
And
never going to know everything.
and if I make a mistake with him, like I tell him something, I come back to him and I say, "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know." Right? It wasn't my intention to control you or anything like that. I'm sorry, you know? And I also look at him and I say, "Hey, you cannot manipulate people like that. You cannot attack people like that. There are ways of having that conversation that are healthy and controlled, but you've got to take a step back, calm yourself, collect yourself, and speak. You've got to do it in a humane fashion,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can't just blow up, right? You've got a safe place. You can talk to me, right? You can talk to your mom, and he'll do that. Like he sometimes won't know how to talk to me, and that's fine. He talks to his mom. He'll wait for me to go out of the room, and I'm like, okay, that's fair, right? He's more comfortable with his mom. That's fair, absolutely. I don't judge him for that,
Mm-mm.
right? And he needs that, right? As a parent, you cannot judge your child, because if you judge your child, you should also be judging yourself, because they're a reflection of your treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, there was a couple questions that we had about depression and teen depression specifically, and
Yeah,
I
let
want to
me
get
see.
to those.
Yeah.
So the first one was, and before I do that, I want to say, if you want to join my text platform, you can text me questions for the next podcast. I usually put them out less than a week before the next episode, but I usually ask people. And if you want to join my text platform, it's also an inspirational daily text platform, and you get a chance. Like if you want to feature a question, text me. I'll look through it. But the number is 1-608-336-4480. It's also, below the podcast in the what do you call that, description.
Mhm.
So you can text me. And two of the questions, we'll start with one from Melody. How can you help a teen with depression who doesn't have motivation for anything? You start with communication for me. What do you think?
No, always start with the communication. You want to get to the bottom of what they're feeling.
Yep. And consistency, right? You can't just walk up to him and be like, why are you depressed? That's not going to work.
No.
It's not enough.
No.
You have to show empathy. And with empathy requires you to invest yourself in them. So you sit down with that teen and you say, how are you? And you actually mean it. You actually mean it. You sit there until they give you an answer. Not just, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk away. You don't accept that answer.
That's the defining moment in that question right there.
It's a bullshit answer.
Yeah.
If you know it's a bullshit answer, ask it again. How are you really doing? Right? We, like human beings, are bullshit detectors.
Yeah.
We see it, right? Sometimes we don't say anything, but we see it, right? Like when I don't want to talk to someone, I'll bullshit you, but it's only because I'm wasting time. I gotta go. Like I got stuff to do, right? If it's real, I say a lot more stuff, right? I give you a real reason. If I give you an excuse, it's real. Because if something happened, I tell you. If something didn't happen and I forgot, because I tell you that too. I'm brutally honest. I fucked up, right? But you can tell when I'm bullshitting because I'm not good at it. Some people are, some people aren't. I'm not.
I'm not either. I have these nervous laughs or make a joke about something and I'll be like, oh, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And if you wanna help a teen, you've got to sit down with them and you've got to look at them and be like, I don't know what you're going through, but I want to. And you have to care. If you don't care, have somebody else do it. I mean, if you want to help them, if you really want to help them, have somebody else that can actually do it, help them. But if you care, if you are, all it takes to be qualified with empathy is the tenacity to sit there and wait. Right? Yeah, it helps if you have the intuition. It helps if you have the intuition to see it, to see your opportunity. Like I'm really good at seeing my opportunity. You know that. Like I just fucking know. I sit down with someone. I'm like, hey, doing all right? And it's just like I ask that question, and people are just like,
it's a bomb drop.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is about me, but I can sit down with someone and just recognize, like, are you okay? And people just throw it at me, and that's okay. Like that's why I do it. That's why I ask the question. But if you're not intuitive like that and you don't know, then ask questions. What's going on? Is it something at school? Is it something here? Is it me? Right? But don't get offended by the answer.
Yeah.
Right? Don't get offended. It happens. Like, Kyle, you and me have had disagreements. Guess what? We work through it.
Yeah. Always have.
We figure it out, right? You are going to, if you're a parent, you are going to have disagreements with your child. You are not going to agree with what they do. But guess what? You don't have to. They're going to figure it out. You were a child once. You sucked at it. We've all sucked at adulthood. It doesn't matter what parents teach kids before adulthood. When you get to adulthood, it's going to suck. You're going to get hit in the face with perspective and lessons that you couldn't have known, right? No matter what.
And the fact of the matter is, you got to help them understand it's okay to fail.
Right. And part of that is being able to show them it's okay to fail. And if you as a parent can sit in front of them and say, I am not the best parent. And if there's something that I have done wrong or am doing wrong, I want I want to talk about it right now and I'm not going to get offended. That's failure in action.
Mm-hmm.
But that's failure in action to a point of actually solving a problem. And that's so fundamental. Like, that's communication, right? Imagine what that could teach your child if you sat in front of him and said, I am not the best parent. I know that. And I'm willing to sit here in front of you and listen to what it is that I have done that causes you pain, causes you problems. Tell me what it is, because I want to help us come together and become closer, become better. If it means that we have to, it might be tense for a little bit and figure things out, tell me. Like, if you can have that conversation with your child, imagine how that prepares them for down the road when they have problems in their relationships. If they have problems with you, they come back to you and they say, hey, I have a problem again. I love you. I appreciate you, but guess what? You're causing me some problems and I need to talk about it. Communication is fundamental to relationships.
It also comes down to being emotionally available to your child.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't be the silent one.
Mm-mm.
You've got to be the leader. If you want to be a role model to your child, you can't just be silent all the time. You have to sit there and show them how to manage emotions. And part of that is taking initiative when the child won't, because the child's not sitting there like, I've got all these things to say. I want to say them right now. You know what? They're sitting there like, I don't know what my mom will do if I tell her she's a bitch. I don't know what my mom will do if I tell her she's a bad parent. Because what do you, like, as a kid, what did you think if you would have told your mom that? What do you think would have happened? I know what would have happened to me. Not good stuff.
No.
My mom would have been pissed.
Yeah, it would have been my mom like yelling at me and then going to tell my dad, and my dad would have been like, oh, you want to talk to your mom like that? Okay.
Yeah. I think around high school was when me and my mom started actually connecting, and started actually, mostly that was my fault, because I didn't speak. I didn't talk to her. I was kid. I did kid things, but I didn't talk about my emotions. I didn't talk about things I've been through. It was right before I joined the military and went to the military. The military really taught me how to communicate, because you have to.
Mm-hmm.
You have to communicate. If you can't, like, military's not going to work very well.
It's one of the big three: move, shoot, communicate.
Right. And yeah, so I think that's a good. What do you think? Did we cover that question pretty well?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah. And the next question is kind of along the same lines. How can we support and come alongside our teens when they don't want to change? And that's from Jamie.
That it's worded a little differently, and I think we nailed it with the big analogy, the big answer from the last question.
Mm-hmm.
How do we support and come up alongside it? You're literally there to be a role model. You're also there to be emotionally available,
Right.
and you're there to ask the hard question: how are you?
I know Jamie, so I think I know what she was trying to lead into.
Let's hear it.
How do you support teens when you weren't able to as a parent in the past? I think is a better way to put this question. So let's say you weren't a good parent prior to. Now you've learned, but your child doesn't want to, your teen doesn't want.
No, okay, I got you.
The support, or they don't want to change because maybe they don't trust you. Does that make sense?
Yep, I got you now.
So I think that's a situation for a lot of people.
Yep. Especially in relationships where the parents are split.
Right.
That's a key factor in some of these cases too. Are the parents split? Why did they split?
Right. Yeah. That's profound, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you support if you're in a divorce,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or if you're just a parent that had troubles in the earlier years of their childhood, or and you're finally coming around, but they don't trust you, or
Mm-hmm.
they don't appreciate you, or they don't love you. Um, what do you do? What do you do? You're on the spot.
I'm on the spot. Oh boy. So word that for me one more time so I got this.
When you, as a parent, could not be there and supportive for your child before this moment,
Okay.
but now you've overcome, you're on a step, you're on a path towards being a better parent, being a better person,
Mm-hmm.
but your teen doesn't trust you, doesn't want to learn from you, doesn't want to listen to you. What do you do?
Oh, they absolutely want nothing to do with me, that would be a really tough pill to swallow at this point. Um, I would still try to be at least available.
How?
It, I would reach out. I would be consistent. Um, be empathetic and be like, hey, I know I screwed up. I had a lot of changes I had to go through.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think you have to, in that situation, you have to sit on the understanding that you can't be offended
Yep.
by how they responded to you. You know, you can't sit there and say, because you're back, you
No.
can't sit there and say, you can't be offended because I'm being a good parent now. They have the right, because you were a bad parent for so long, or you were an unsupportive parent, or you were a, what do you call those? The parents that aren't there. God, what is that? An absent parent
Yep.
for so long that, what do you expect? Right?
Yeah.
If that's what happened, the reality is that they're not going to, one, trust you. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to, you're not their support structure, and you cannot be offended by that.
Yeah. And you can't go into that situation expecting them to forget.
Right. Yep.
It's just no. If you go into it hoping that they're going to forget, you've already lost.
Right. So, yeah, and you've got to sit there with that assumption, but also remember that you're a person and you need to keep moving forward. So don't be offended.
No.
Just respect the reality of the situation, and keep focusing on yourself, but also share yourself. Like, write them a letter, write them a text, be like, hey, I was this is what I've been through. I just want you to know, I don't need, if I know that you still don't appreciate me, and that's okay. I understand. Be empathetic, be understanding, and extend the olive branch and extend yourself of like, here I am. If you want it, okay. If you don't want me in your life,
Yeah,
okay.
I got it.
And you've got to accept that. You've got to, you can continue to extend that olive branch, but they do not have to take it.
Yep.
And you've got to move on. And you might have to grieve that loss. And that's hard. That's very hard.
But it's a serious matter too. There's going to be times where there's nothing you can say that's going to change how they feel.
Right. That's life. At the end of the day, life is not fair. Life doesn't care about your feelings. Life doesn't give a fuck.
Life goes on.
Life goes on. Yep. It's tough.
Absolutely.
Tough end of the episode. Brutal. But that's life.
But we still have the choice to make the best of it.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. And you have to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to be the smartest one in the room, you have to love whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to love, if even when you don't want to do it, you've got to love it. Right? There are days I do not want to edit this podcast, but I got to love it because.
And I'm slowly learning myself. I've been over here dabbling with my version of this too. So
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, this has been a long one.
Hour and a half.
Yeah, that's all right though. Well, do you have any final words? I think we covered a lot. I mean, there's always more that can be said, but we've got lives.
Yeah. Like you said, we all got lives, and we got to understand the fact that everybody's lives are different. We just got to learn to not judge based off of those differences.
Yep.
I think that's the defining moment for a lot of people, is the judgment aspect of this. So,
yep, for sure. Absolutely. And it's got to be, you know, you've got to be willing to sit down and show people, prove to people that you actually care. And if you don't care, show them someone that can, right?
absolutely.
Send them my way. I'll help them.
Send them my way. I'm here.
Right. You know, share this podcast with them and share my TikToks and share my Instagram, whatever, share my YouTube, share it all. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they find a way to work through their problems.
That's the ultimate goal. If you're struggling, find something that is going to help you get through.
Yep. And on that note, we're going to call it a day.
Yep.
Right. So first off, thank you for joining us on this week's episode. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. One final time, I'm going to put out my text number, because if you want a tech, or if you want to pose a question or anything, if you want to propose a topic or anything like that, text me 1-608-336-4480. Next week, we're going to have a special guest. I'm not going to reveal who, so you're just going to have to tune in to find out. But thank you for listening to the Dylan Experience.